Hello, my name is John David Powell, and from the television studios of the Jack J. Valenti School of Communication at the University of Houston, this is the Discovery section of Graffiti, the electronic newsletter of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. Susan Rasmussen is a professor of anthropology and one of the organizers of the recent symposium on urban health and anthropology at the university. Her areas of research include religion and symbolism, gender, aging and life course, anthropology and human rights, ethnographic analysis, particularly in relation to memory and personal narrative, and she's one of the world's leading authorities on the Tuaregs of West Africa. She received her undergraduate degree from Northwestern University, her graduate degree from the University of Chicago, and her doctorate from Indiana University. She joined the University of Houston faculty in 1990, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. And there was something I left out in the many areas of expertise that you have.
Oh, it's not really a serious omission. It's healing systems, which is very closely related to, for example, religion.
Okay, tell me about healing systems.
Well, one of my interests has been in both therapeutic rituals and healing specialists. For example, I started out studying rituals called spirit possession among the Tuareg in a rural area of northern Niger called the Aïr Mountains. And these are rituals that are staged for persons believed to be occupied by an alien spirit. And they really serve as a form of group therapy, basically.
Okay. Now, by an alien spirit, are we meaning an outside spirit or an alien spirit?
An outside spirit, okay. I guess. Not in the American. So it's kind of not in the American English sense of alien.
A possession, as we might know it.
Possession, okay. Transpossession.
Transpossession
is a central feature of these rituals.
Okay. Now, you were the organizer, one of the organizers of the symposium that we had.
Yes.
How did that go?
Oh, it went very well, thank you. It was just this weekend, Friday and Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And your area was?
Well, my particular area, I presented a paper on, well, I organized a panel specifically on gender, aging, and the urban body. Okay. That was the title, the theme of our panel. And my particular paper had a rather cryptic sounding title. It was called Fat Battles. A little bit different from my older topic of spirit possession. In this particular paper, I analyzed the effect of urban bureaucracies on a long-standing Tuareg ideal of female bodily aesthetic beauty, which is what we would call fatness, or actually not in the sense of large and muscular, but actually what we would call rotund or obese. So this has been the ideal prevalent among many, although not all Tuareg, but many Tuareg have tended, especially in the rural nomadic areas, to prefer women we would call fat.
Or Rubenesque, maybe? Or,
well,
a little bit more than that?
Even a little more than what we would term Rubenesque. I know there are semantic and semiotic issues here, but the Tamashek term tzawira approximately translates as rotund. I believe it would be fair to translate it as that.
And so what is the issue?
Well, the issue in the towns is that there have been these, well, in former times, adolescent girls underwent ritualized fattening rituals inside their mother's tent in the countryside among the nomadic peoples. But recently in the towns, there have been efforts by international NGO agencies as well as other bureaucracies coming from the state to foster girls' education, and much of this education centers on health education. And there have been efforts to change this because of what some outsiders perceive as the health problems it may create. Mm-hmm. For example, diabetes, etc. So in my paper, I examined both the power, the impact of these bureaucracies on the one hand, but also some local resistance to it on the other. Not all locals embrace this new aesthetic of a slimmer woman. Mm-hmm. That's basically what I was examining in that paper.
So we should probably explain that the Tuaregs are West African, Niger, excuse me, Mali, and in this area.
Yes, actually the Tuareg are interesting to me because they really live at the crossroads of what has been called so-called North Africa and so-called Africa south of the Sahara. And Niger and Mali, also Algeria and Libya, are home to them. Keep in mind that the nation-state boundaries of Africa are really artificial. They were established by the colonial powers, and they don't always coincide with the cultural and ethnic boundaries of people. So today we find Tuareg basically in parts of those 4 countries, but they're very interesting because they break down the old tendency in African studies to draw too rigid divisions between what was termed North African culture and Africa south of the Sahara, because Niger and Mali and Tuareg culture also are really crossroads between these different parts of Africa. So that's one, I think, one very interesting aspect to those countries and those people.
And keeping to the crossroads theme, these are nomadic and semi-nomadic people.
Yes, today they're predominantly semi-nomadic because of a series of droughts which have decimated many of their livestock herds, and also as a result of some French colonial and also some post-colonial nation-state policies which tended to disrupt their way of life. And as a result, today most Tuareg actually combine pastoral nomadic livestock herding with other occupations such as oasis gardening, labor migration. There are some caravan trade expeditions continuing, although caravans are much on the decline, and artisanry, some of them. But today, I think most of them still live in rural areas, although I've done both. I've done my research both in the towns and the countryside of Mali and Niger. But many of them actually, even in the rural areas now, tend to combine different occupations. It's difficult to keep making a living off exclusively livestock herding.
Well, sure, especially with the droughts.
Yes, the droughts.
So how are they making the adjustment between the nomadic life, semi-nomadic life, and the 21st century life of having maybe to move into the urban areas?
Well, this is in fact one impetus for some of these international NGO and central government nation-state programs, you know, in health and education, for example. They're trying to encourage sending children to school. And although, of course, education has been important among the Tuareg until recently, until mid-20th century or so, it primarily took the form of either Quranic education or a more informal education within the mother's tent, learning local traditions, the local script or alphabet called Tifinar of the Tamashek language. And there was a suspicion of more formal secular schools established first by the French and later continued by the central state, because there was a fear these would destroy their culture, also a fear that they would serve as a means of keeping track of nomads through censuses and taxation. And furthermore, some parents are concerned that the teachers would harass their daughters. So lately there's been quite a bit of emphasis, especially in the towns, upon girls' education. And health education, as I said, is one element in this.
And there's about how many of them, what's the population?
Of the Tuareg or the town?
Tuareg, yeah.
Well, estimates vary. Statistics are notoriously unreliable.
It's hard to do a head count.
Between approximately, yes, it is. Between approximately, estimates vary from approximately 250,000 to over 1 million.
Yeah.
Now, there are several reasons for this. As you quite rightly pointed out, of course, nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples move around a lot, so they're difficult to keep track of. But there are additional reasons as well. There have been, allegations that some governments have tended to underestimate or underreport the population count of more marginalized peoples in order to give the impression, in fact, there aren't that many of them for political reasons.
Sure.
Now, this is difficult to really verify, but there are some allegations that has happened. Also, because of all of the recent upheavals and turmoils, both the ecological disasters of droughts and sporadic outbreaks of war and violence in the regions, many people have dispersed as refugees and political exiles. So it's complicated estimating their numbers.
Susan Rassmann, thank you for being with us.
You're quite welcome.
I appreciate you coming by.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next month.